Hello, today I'd like to talk about the Writing Center at the University of Washington, Tacoma. I grade a lot of papers, and a recurring problem is bad grammar, including incomplete sentences, pronoun confusion, misplaced apostrophes, and so on. Often, the problem makes passages very unclear, even unreadable. You can imagine my dismay when, during winter quarter, I discovered that the Writing Center had fired off the following anti-racist administrations of Professor Asao Inoue and Vice Chancellor Jill Purdy. As the Writing Center statement urges, there is no inherent standard of English, and with this in mind, the Writing Center aims to ensure that through compassion and careful consideration, staff do not inadvertently embrace racist practices. What Inoue and Purdy mean is that enforcing the grammar and usage of American Standard English in America opens us to embracing racism without even knowing it. After catching flack in various media outlets with headlines like University of Washington declares proper grammar is racist at Breitbart, College Writing Center declares American grammar a racist, unjust language structure at Fox News, and grammar is racist, you bet it is, you racist at the Daily Wire, the university issued a response declaring that the Writing Center's statement has been repeatedly misrepresented by some issues-oriented blogs based in, oh my, other states. All of this raises an important question. Is the Writing Center really telling us that grammar is racist? Or are the charges crazy? I don't think they are, which I will demonstrate by looking at the Writing Center's own statement and at what one might gather from a quick reading of Professor Inoue's book, Anti-Racist Writing Assessment Ecologies. First, let's have a look at the Writing Center's statement. The Writing Center works from several important beliefs that are crucial to helping writers write and succeed in a racist society. The racist conditions of our society are not simply a matter of bias or prejudice that some people hold. In fact, most racism, for instance, is not accomplished through intent. Racism is the normal condition of things. Racism is pervasive. It is in the systems, structures, rules, languages, expectations, and guidelines that make up our classes, school, and society. For example, linguistic and writing research has shown clearly for many decades that there is no inherent standard of English. Language is constantly changing. Those two facts make it very difficult to justify placing people in hierarchies or restricting opportunities and privileges because of the way people communicate in particular versions of English. Because we all live, work, learn, and communicate within such racist systems, the consultants in the Writing Center assume that a big part of our job is to help students become more critical of these unjust language structures as they affect student writing and the judgment of that writing. In particular, being aware of racism as structural offers students the best chances to develop as writers and succeed on their own terms in an inherently racist society. Furthermore, by acknowledging and critiquing the systemic racism that forms parts of UWT and the languages and literacies expected in it, students and Writing Center consultants can cultivate a more socially just future for everyone. Just avoiding racism is not enough because it means we are doing nothing to stop racism at large, and it amounts to allowing racism to continue. In addition to this statement of beliefs, the Writing Center offers a set of commitments including being sensitive to our language practices, what we say or allow to be said, and other microaggressions that may make some people feel uncomfortable or feel in some way inferior, but not a thing about helping students write more cleanly, clearly, and concisely. They will, however, help you police your own so-called microaggressions. In the Writing Center's 506-word statement, the terms racism and racist occur 17 times. Racism is described as pervading the languages that make up our classes, school, and society, and the racism that forms part of UWT and the languages and literacies, that is, the grammar, expected in it. Expected, I suppose, by philosophy lecturers like me. It's hard to read this without getting the message that grammar is racist. If what is really meant is that privileging standard American English as standard is racist, the simpler interpretation is still hardly crazy or altogether wrong. Second, and this is where things get really interesting, in his book Anti-Racist Writing Assessment Ecologies, Inoue states that racism, on the other hand, is real. It is experienced daily, often in unseen ways, but always felt. We may call the racism we see something else, like the product of laziness, or just the way things are, or the result of personal choices or economics, but it is racism. There are social patterns that can be detected. Thus, I do not use racism as a term that references personal prejudice or bigotry. I am not concerned with that kind of racism in this book. I am concerned with structural racism, the institutional kind, the kind that makes many students of color like me when I was younger believe that their failures in school were purely due to their own lacking in ability, desire, or work ethic. Racism, seen and understood as structural, instead reveals the ways that systems, like the ecology of the classroom, already work to create failure in particular places and associate it with particular bodies. The idea here is that though race is unreal, racism is real and is systemic. Racism hides behind explanations for disparate outcomes like personal choice. At this point, it is easy to see how appeals to personal choice, for example, might get labeled as microaggressions by someone like Inoue. On his view, personal choice is a pretense slung to explain unequal social outcomes as anything other than racism, which is itself racist because it propagates racism. Disparate impact of an assessment strategy across racial demographic groups, we are told, is unfair in that, statistically, it privileges middle-class white students. Thus, Inoue tells us, there is something wrong with judgment itself in writing classrooms, which are all centered around what Inoue calls the white racial habitus. The problem, we are told, arises when vernaculars, language patterns that are often racialized or part of what Inoue calls a person's racial formation, are cast in a hierarchy as degenerate versions of standard American, that is, white English. Inoue is then, 30 pages in, prepared to state plainly what he alluded to in saying that success and failure are associated with particular bodies. So-called proper English, or dominant discourses, are historically connected to the white body. Whiteness, as a set of writing expectations established as standard American English focusing on, as Inoue says, abstract principles, rationality and logic, clarity and consistency, just is a racial product of white hegemony, that is, white supremacy, from which students must liberate themselves. Let that sink in. Standard American English's focus on rationality and logic is racist white hegemony. This is just astounding. Anyway, the very question of what assessment can really come to without focusing on quality judged against a standard like American Standard English is, in Inoue's own words, racist. No kidding. Look it up on page 131. Put simply, standard grammar, or rather, its enforcement as standard American English grammar, is a racist, white supremacist practice. This gives new meaning to being called a grammar Nazi. You know, I should probably hide that Chicago Manual of Style I've got on my desk. So, does the University of Washington Tacoma Writing Center declare that grammar is racist? Well, the claim that those ne'er-do-wells from out of state grossly misinterpreted the Writing Center statement is spurious. First, it really does look like the University of Washington Tacoma holds at least that writing assessment practices prioritizing standard American English grammar are racist. To be sure, that is a weaker claim than saying that standard American grammar is itself racist, which the headlines implied. And I do think this is what the Writing Center and Inoue really mean. However, we should keep in mind a second point. Given the connection between standard American English and the white body in Inoue's book, it's not entirely unreasonable to interpret the Writing Center statement as saying that standard American English grammar is itself racist. To avoid any confusion, I have argued that the charge that the UW-Tacoma Writing Center has declared that grammar is racist is not groundless, and have tried to clarify what the Writing Center is saying, which is hardly a less troubling proposition than grammar is racist. However, I have not argued against Inoue or the Writing Center's claims about racism. I'll leave that to you to think about for now. If this content resonated with you, raised questions in your mind, or otherwise made you think, be sure to comment, click like, and subscribe. If you think I got something wrong, Or if you hated it, feel free to explain why in the comments.